So you think you know what cruel and unusual punishment looks like? You think waterboarding is bad? Or maybe you've heard about the electric chair and thought that was the peak of human cruelty. Well, let me tell you something that's going to absolutely blow your mind. What I'm about to show you makes modern torture look like a day at the spa. We're talking about punishments so twisted, so psychologically devastating, that they would make seasoned interrogators quit their jobs and become kindergarten teachers instead. I spent weeks researching the darkest corners of ancient legal systems, digging through historical records that most people have never even heard of. And what I found will haunt your nightmares. These aren't your typical history class punishments like being drawn and quartered or burned at the stake. Those are rookie moves compared to what ancient civilizations came up with when they really wanted to make someone suffer. But here's the thing that makes this even more disturbing. These weren't random acts of violence or torture during wartime. These were official legal punishments endorsed by governments, cheered on by crowds, and considered completely normal by the societies that used them. Imagine walking down the street and seeing these happening in broad daylight, with families bringing their kids to watch like it's some kind of twisted entertainment. By the end of this video, you're going to understand why some historical punishments were so effective that entire populations would rather die than face them. And trust me, after you hear about the boats of scaphism, you'll never complain about a parking ticket again. Let's start with something that sounds almost pleasant until you understand what it actually involves: the bronze bull of Phalaris. Now, when you first hear that name, you might think it's some kind of ancient sports trophy, or maybe a statue. But this device was engineered specifically to maximize human suffering in ways that would make a horror movie director throw up. Picture this. You're a criminal in ancient Sicily, and you've been sentenced to death by the bronze bull. They drag you to this massive bronze statue of a bull, and at first, you might think they're just going to sacrifice you in front of it. But then they open up a door in the side of the bull, and you realize with absolute terror that you're supposed to go inside. The bull is completely hollow, just big enough for a human being to fit inside, but not big enough to stand up or lie down comfortably. You're forced into a crouched position, and then they seal you inside. But here's where it gets truly diabolical. They light a fire underneath the bronze bull and slowly roast you alive from the outside. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's horrible, but at least it would be over relatively quickly. Wrong. The genius, and I use that word in the most sarcastic way possible, behind this device was that bronze heats up slowly and evenly. You don't just burst into flames and die quickly. Instead, you're slowly cooked like a piece of meat in an oven, conscious for most of the process. But wait, it gets worse. The bull was designed with a complex system of tubes and chambers that would amplify and distort your screams, making them sound like the bellowing of an actual bull. So while you're being slowly roasted alive, your agony is being turned into entertainment for the crowd. Your final moments of life become a twisted symphony of suffering. The most messed up part? The inventor of this device, a guy named Perillaios, thought he was doing something noble. He presented it to the tyrant Phalaris as a gift, probably expecting a reward or recognition. Instead, Phalaris decided to test the device immediately by making Perillaios the first victim. I guess that's what we call poetic justice, but it doesn't make the punishment any less horrifying. Moving on to something that makes the bronze bull look like a quick and merciful death. The boats, also known as scaphism. This punishment was used in ancient Persia, and it's so psychologically disturbing that reading about it will change how you think about human cruelty forever. The process starts innocently enough. They take 2 boats, or sometimes 2 hollowed out tree trunks, and they force the victim to lie down in one of them. Then they place the second boat on top, creating a makeshift coffin with just the victim's head, hands, and feet sticking out. So far, it just sounds like being trapped in a really uncomfortable box. But then comes the twist that turns this from uncomfortable to absolutely nightmarish. They force-feed the victim milk and honey until they develop severe diarrhea. Not just a little bit of stomach discomfort, but violent, uncontrollable diarrhea that covers their entire body inside the boats. Then they smear more honey on the victim's exposed face, hands, and feet, and they push the boats out into a stagnant swamp or pond. And then they wait. The honey attracts every insect in the area. Flies, wasps, bees, and other creatures swarm the victim's exposed body parts, stinging and biting relentlessly. Inside the boats, the victim is lying in their own waste, unable to move, unable to escape, slowly being eaten alive by insects while the honey keeps attracting more and more of them. The combination of dehydration, infection, and constant insect attacks would typically kill the victim within a few days, but those few days would feel like an eternity. The most disturbing part is that this wasn't a quick execution. It was designed to be a slow, gradual descent into madness and death. Victims would often start hallucinating from the pain and the constant buzzing of insects. Some historical accounts suggest that people would lose their minds completely before they finally died. What makes this even more twisted is that the Persian legal system considered this an appropriate punishment for certain crimes. This wasn't some medieval torture chamber operated by sadistic criminals. This was official government policy approved by lawmakers and carried out by state executioners. And here's something that will really mess with your head. There are historical records of people begging to be executed by more traditional methods like beheading or hanging rather than face the boats. Imagine being so terrified of a punishment that you would literally prefer to have your head chopped off instead. But if you think the boats are as bad as it gets, let me introduce you to something that would make even the most hardened executioner question their career choices. The bamboo torture, also known as the growing death. This one comes from ancient Asia, and it's so diabolical that it turns one of nature's most peaceful plants into an instrument of unimaginable suffering. Here's how this nightmare works. They tie the victim down over a patch of fresh bamboo shoots, positioning them so the shoots are directly underneath their body. Now, you might be thinking, what's the big deal? It's just a plant, right? Well, here's the thing about bamboo that most people don't know. Some species can grow up to 3 feet in a single day. That's not a typo. 3 feet in 24 hours. That means the bamboo is growing at a rate of about 1.5 inches per hour. So while you're tied down, unable to move, these razor-sharp bamboo shoots are slowly but steadily growing up through your body. The process starts with just a little pressure, like someone gently poking you with a stick. Annoying, but not particularly painful. But as the hours pass, that gentle pressure becomes stabbing pain as the bamboo shoots pierce through your skin. And they don't stop there. They keep growing, pushing through muscle, organs, and eventually coming out the other side of your body. What makes this so psychologically devastating is that you can feel every millimeter of growth. You're awake for the entire process, completely aware as these plants slowly skewer you from the inside out. The bamboo doesn't kill you quickly by hitting a vital organ. Instead, it takes its time, creating dozens of small wounds that gradually become larger and larger. The most messed up part is that bamboo shoots are incredibly strong and persistent. They can grow through concrete, so human flesh doesn't stand a chance. Once they start penetrating your body, there's absolutely nothing that can stop them except death. And death could take days to arrive. Historical accounts describe victims screaming for hours before eventually falling silent, not because they died, but because they lost the strength to make noise. The bamboo would continue growing through their bodies even after they lost consciousness, creating a horrifying spectacle that would terrorize anyone who witnessed it. Now let's talk about something called the Brazen Head, which sounds like a medieval rock band, but was actually one of the most psychologically twisted punishments ever devised. This one was used in various forms across different ancient civilizations, but the core concept was always the same. Drive the victim completely insane before killing them. The process involves placing a specially designed bronze or iron helmet on the victim's head. But this isn't just any helmet. This thing is engineered to amplify and distort sound in the most disturbing ways possible. Inside the helmet, there are carefully positioned chambers and tubes that take every sound the victim makes and turns it into a deafening, echoing nightmare. When you try to speak, your voice comes back at you as a distorted, inhuman shriek. When you breathe, it sounds like a hurricane inside your own head. Your heartbeat becomes a thunderous pounding that drowns out all other thoughts. But here's the really twisted part. The helmet also amplifies sounds from outside, but it distorts them beyond recognition. So you can hear people talking, but you can't understand what they're saying. You can hear footsteps, but they sound like giants stomping around you. Every little noise becomes a terrifying cacophony of confusion and fear. The psychological impact is immediate and devastating. Within hours, victims would start showing signs of complete mental breakdown. They would scream and beg for the helmet to be removed, but their pleas would come out as inhuman howls that only made the experience more terrifying for everyone involved. Many victims would lose their minds completely within the first day. But the helmet wasn't designed to kill quickly. Victims could survive for weeks inside this auditory hell, slowly losing all connection to reality as their minds shattered under the constant assault of distorted sound. By the time death finally arrived, usually from dehydration or complete mental collapse, the person inside the helmet was no longer recognizably human. What makes this punishment particularly disturbing is that it leaves no visible marks on the body. To outside observers, it might look like the victim is just wearing a strange hat, but inside that helmet, a human mind is being systematically destroyed in ways that would make modern psychological torture techniques look like gentle therapy sessions. The historical records describe guards who refused to work with the brazen head because the sounds that came from victims were so inhuman and disturbing that they would haunt the guards' dreams for years afterward. Some executioners reportedly quit their jobs rather than continue using this device. And here's something that will really mess with your perspective on ancient justice systems. These punishments weren't reserved for the worst criminals or enemies of the state. They were used for relatively minor offenses like theft, adultery, or speaking out against the government. Imagine getting the brazen head treatment because you stole a loaf of bread or criticized your local mayor. So there you have it. Ancient civilizations weren't just creative with architecture and art, they were absolute masters of human suffering, turning punishment into a twisted science that would make modern interrogators look like amateurs. These weren't just executions, they were psychological warfare designed to break the human spirit in ways we can barely comprehend today. Makes you grateful for our boring modern justice system, doesn't it? If this video made you question everything you thought you knew about ancient history, make sure to subscribe because we're just getting started with the dark secrets of the past.